Everything you think you know about the physical world is wrong. Not slightly wrong, not a little off. Fundamentally, completely, beautifully wrong. And once you understand the truth, you'll never look at a table, a chair, or your own hand the same way again. Right now, as you watch this, you're sitting on something solid. Maybe a chair, maybe a couch. It feels firm, real. It resists you. Physics class told you that chair is made of atoms, and you probably pictured something like tiny little billiard balls stacked together. Small, hard, definite, predictable. That picture? It's a comfortable lie we tell to children, and it's time to grow up. Because here's what the chair you're sitting on actually is. It is almost entirely empty space. The atoms making up that chair are so hollow, so overwhelmingly void, that if you could somehow compress all the actual matter in your body, every proton, every neutron, down to the density of an atomic nucleus, the entire human race would fit into a space about the size of a sugar cube. A sugar cube. All 8 billion of us. The rest of us, everything else we think we are, is empty space animated by invisible forces. That's not poetry, that's physics. So let's talk about what's really going on inside an atom. Let's talk about why electrons don't actually orbit the nucleus the way your textbook showed you. Let's talk about why rotating a particle 720 degrees, not 360, but 720, is the only way to get it back to where it started. And let's talk about the most unsettling truth in all of science, that particles don't actually have definite properties until something looks at them. Welcome to the quantum world, the real world, where the rules that govern everything you've ever touched are so strange that Richard Feynman himself once said, "If you think you understand quantum mechanics, you don't understand quantum mechanics." Context bridge. To understand why any of this matters, let's start where scientists started, with a question that seems laughably simple. What is stuff made of? What is the smallest thing? For the ancient Greeks, it was philosophy. Democritus proposed around 400 BCE that if you kept cutting matter in half, eventually you'd get to something you couldn't cut anymore. He called it the atomos, the uncuttable. For over 2,000 years, that was about as far as the thinking went. Then in the early 1800s, John Dalton turned it into real science. He showed that chemical reactions behaved as though matter came in discrete, indivisible packets. He gave us the first real atomic theory. And in the late 1800s and early 1900s, everything exploded. J.J. Chesson discovered the electron in 1897. Ernest Rutherford discovered the nucleus in 1911. Niels Bohr proposed the model most of us still picture, electrons orbiting a central nucleus like tiny planets around a sun. That Bohr model, that image, it got printed in every textbook, plastered on science classroom walls, stamped on chemistry t-shirts. And it is, in the most important ways, wrong. Not just incomplete, wrong in ways that matter deeply if you want to understand what reality actually is. Because the truth of what atoms really are and what electrons really do isn't just different. It's strange in a way that should stop you cold. It dissolved the boundary between the observer and the observed. It revealed that matter at its deepest level is not a collection of things. It's a collection of possibilities. Let's start with the emptiness, core explanation, the hollow heart of matter. Imagine a cathedral, one of those enormous European cathedrals with ceilings that soar hundreds of feet overhead and vast echoing halls of open air. Now imagine somewhere in the middle of that cathedral, there's a single grain of sand. That grain of sand is the nucleus of an atom. The walls of the cathedral, the outermost reaches of that vast empty space, represent where the electrons are. That's the scale. That's how empty an atom is. When Rutherford figured this out in 1911, he was genuinely shocked. He fired positively charged particles at a thin sheet of gold foil, expecting them to pass right through like bullets through tissue paper, and most of them did. But some, a tiny fraction, bounced back. He described it as firing artillery shells at tissue paper and having them come back and hit you. The only explanation was that almost all of the atom's mass was concentrated in an unimaginably tiny, dense, positive nucleus at the center, with vast emptiness around it. So why don't we fall through the floor? If atoms are almost entirely empty space, what are we standing on? This is the question that gets really interesting. You're not actually touching the floor. Not in the sense you think. Your feet and the floor never make contact at the atomic level. What you experience as solid ground is electromagnetic repulsion. The electrons in your feet and the electrons in the floor pushing away from each other with tremendous force. Because electrons are negatively charged and like charges repel. The feeling of solidity is actually the feeling of electromagnetic force stopping two clouds of electrons from occupying the same space. You are floating imperceptibly above every surface you've ever stood on. Stop. Think about that for a moment. Every handshake you've ever shared, every hug, every time you felt the ground beneath your feet, what you experienced as contact, as touch, was electromagnetic fields pushing back. We never literally touch anything. We interact with the invisible force fields surrounding the emptiness inside atoms. Now you might be thinking, okay fine, atoms are mostly empty and electrons push back, but that doesn't seem that crazy. What's the really weird part? The really weird part is what electrons actually are. Deepening insight, probability clouds and the death of defined orbits. The Bohr model, that clean, satisfying image of electrons orbiting a nucleus like planets around a sun, makes one enormous, catastrophic assumption. It assumes electrons are things, definite little objects with a specific location moving in a specific path. They're not. An electron between measurements doesn't have a location. It has a probability distribution. It exists as a kind of smeared-out quantum fog, occupying a region of space according to a mathematical wave function that tells you the likelihood of finding it in any given spot if you were to look. This isn't a limitation of our instruments. It's not that the electron is somewhere and we just can't figure out where. The electron genuinely does not have a definite position until you measure it. Before measurement, it exists in a superposition of all possible positions simultaneously. Richard Feynman loved to capture this with a thought experiment. Imagine you set up two slits in a wall and fire electrons at them one at a time, one single electron. On the other side of the wall is a detector screen. Now, a particle should go through one slit or the other. It should leave one mark, one definite dot on the screen, consistent with having traveled a definite path. But here's what actually happens. Over thousands of electrons, the screen fills up not with two clusters of marks, one behind each slit, but with an interference pattern. Alternating bands of many marks and no marks at all. The kind of pattern you'd only get if something was a wave, spreading through both slits at once and interfering with itself. Each individual electron somehow goes through both slits simultaneously as a wave of probability. But the moment you place a detector to measure which slit it goes through, the moment you try to catch it, the interference pattern vanishes. The electrons start behaving like particles again, hitting in two clusters. The act of measurement destroys the quantum behavior. This is the measurement problem, and is the most unsettling thing in all of physics. The universe seems to behave differently when it's being watched. Particles snap into definite states only when observed. Before that, they exist as a superposition, a quantum mixture of all possible states at once. Niels Bohr described this by saying there is no deep reality before measurement. No property is real until it is measured. Einstein famously hated this. He spent years arguing that surely the electron had a definite position all along, we just didn't know it. He called the alternative spooky action at a distance, and believed there had to be hidden variables, hidden information we were missing that would restore order and determinism to physics. Then in 1964, a physicist named John Bell came up with a way to test it. His theorem showed that if Einstein's hidden variable idea were true, experimental results would fall within certain statistical limits, what we now call Bell's inequalities. In the 1980s, Alain Aspect ran the experiment. The results violated Bell's inequalities. Einstein was wrong. The universe genuinely is indeterminate at the quantum level. Particles genuinely don't have definite properties until measured. Aspect won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2022 for this work, and it confirmed one of the strangest truths in science. Reality, at its foundation, is probabilistic. But here's where it gets even more interesting. These probability clouds, these wave functions describing the likely positions of electrons, are not random blobs. They have specific, beautiful shapes determined by quantum mechanics. They're called orbitals, and they look nothing like planetary orbits. Some are spherical, some are shaped like dumbbells with lobes pointing in opposite directions. Some have complex, multi-lobed structures like four-leaf clovers or donut shapes with nodes of zero probability running through them. And the rules governing which electron can occupy which orbital are exquisitely precise. No two electrons in the same atom can be in the same quantum state simultaneously. This is the Pauli exclusion principle, formulated by Wolfgang Pauli in 1925. It sounds like a technicality. It is in fact the reason matter exists as we know it. It's why electrons fill up different orbitals instead of all collapsing to the lowest energy level. It's why atoms have the sizes they do. It's why chemistry happens at all. Without the Pauli exclusion principle, all matter would collapse. Atoms would be incomprehensibly small. There would be no molecules, no crystals, no biological structures, no you. One rule about quantum identity underpins the entire material world. Now let's talk about the strangest thing, the 700-degree electron. The strange geometry of quantum spin here is a fact that will seem impossible until you sit with it long enough. Electrons have a property called spin, not literal spinning. We shouldn't think of the electron as a tiny spinning ball because electrons are point particles with no physical size to spin. Spin is a purely quantum mechanical property with no classical analog, but it behaves mathematically like angular momentum, so we call it spin. Now, ordinary objects in our world have a rotational symmetry of 360 degrees. You rotate a baseball 360 degrees, you get back to where you started. Every object, every shape we know follows this rule, symmetry after one full rotation. It seems like the most basic fact about geometry imaginable. Electrons and all particles with half-integer spin break this rule profoundly and completely. If you rotate an electron by 360 degrees, you do not get back to the original state. The quantum state of the electron picks up a negative sign. It becomes the mathematical negative of what it was. To return an electron to its original quantum state, you must rotate it 720 degrees, 2 full rotations. If that sounds impossible to visualize, that's because it is an ordinary three-dimensional intuition. But there's a beautiful way to understand it using what's called a Dirac belt trick. Take a belt, hold one end fixed, and rotate the other end 360 degrees around. The belt is now twisted. No matter how you move the belt through space, as long as you keep both ends fixed, you cannot untangle that twist. Now rotate the free end another full 360 degrees for a total of 720 degrees. Now the belt is twisted differently. And here's the remarkable thing. You can now untangle the belt entirely just by looping it through space. 2 full rotations produce a configuration that can be undone. 1 full rotation cannot. Electrons live in mathematical space that works like that belt. Their wave functions are described not by ordinary rotation mathematics, but by something called spinors, mathematical objects that require 2 full rotations to return to their starting point. This is not an analogy or a model. It is the exact mathematics. Electrons are spinors. They inhabit a universe with a more complex geometry than intuition allows. And this isn't just abstract mathematics. It has real, measurable consequences. When neutron beams were split and sent through different magnetic field orientations in experiments in the 1970s, they could be recombined and made to interfere with each other. And the interference pattern changed measurably depending on how much the spin of the particles had been rotated. Rotating by 360 degrees produced a measurable phase shift in the interference pattern. Rotating by 720 degrees restored it. The experiment confirmed directly that particles have this non-classical rotational symmetry. Reality, at the quantum level, has a geometry that defies everything our evolved primate brains find intuitive. Particles don't have to play by the geometric rules of our macroscopic experience. They never did. Mind-expanding conclusion. The illusion beneath the solid world. Let's take a breath and put this all together. You are made of atoms. Each of those atoms is almost entirely empty space. A cathedral of void with a grain of sand nucleus at its center. The electrons aren't orbiting that nucleus in neat planetary paths. They exist as probability clouds, quantum fogs defined by wave functions that describe not where the electrons are but where they might be found if you looked. They have no definite position, no definite properties, until measurement collapses those possibilities into a single actuality, the solidity you feel. Every surface, every texture, every sensation of physical contact is the felt consequence of electromagnetic fields between those probability clouds, not solid matter pressing against solid matter. Force fields interacting across emptiness. The world you walk through every day is an illusion, not in a mystical sense, in the most precise scientific sense. The solidity, the definiteness, the fixed and predictable nature of ordinary experience. These are emergent properties that arise from an underlying quantum reality that is probabilistic, indeterminate, and geometrically strange in ways that have no analog in daily life. Here's a thought experiment to carry with you. Imagine you're walking on a beach and you pick up a handful of sand. You're holding perhaps a billion atoms in your hand. Each one is a universe of emptiness. Each electron in each atom has no definite position until it interacts with something. The entire handful of sand, all that apparent substance and solidity, is, at its foundation, a collection of quantum probabilities that happen to produce the experience of texture, temperature, and weight in the sensing apparatus of your nervous system. What you call reality is the brain's interface with quantum math. And yet, and this is perhaps the most beautiful thing, the quantum rules that produce all this strangeness are extraordinarily precise. The wave functions are not random. They are described by the Schrödinger equation, one of the most powerful and exact equations in all of science. The probability distributions are not guesses. They predict experimental results with accuracy to 10 decimal places. Quantum mechanics is simultaneously the strangest and the most accurate theory ever devised by the human mind. It underlies every semiconductor, every laser, every MRI machine, every LED screen you've ever looked at. The strangeness works. The weirdness is productive. Reality is bizarre, and it is also rigorously, exquisitely mathematical. There's something almost unbearably beautiful about that. Philosophical reflection, Richard Feynman, used to talk about two ways of looking at a flower. A scientist, a friend once complained to him, sees only atoms and loses the beauty. Feynman disagreed. He argued that knowing about the atoms, knowing about the quantum choreography, the electromagnetic interactions, the photons bouncing off molecular structures and into your eye, doesn't diminish the beauty of a flower. It adds to it. It layers depth upon depth. There is the beauty you see, and then beneath it, the beauty of the mechanism, and beneath that, the beauty of the equations. Beauty, all the way down. The atom is not a boring little billiard ball. It is a cathedral of emptiness with a thunderstorm of probability at its heart. The electron is not a tiny marble rolling in a groove. It is a smear of quantum potential that collapses into specificity only when reality demands an answer. The particle you think you're made of doesn't have a definite spin direction until you measure it. And when you do, the universe, the entire universe, responds. You are not separate from this quantum world. You are made of it. Every neuron firing as you process these ideas is doing so because of quantum mechanical processes, electron transfers, molecular interactions, electromagnetic fields. The thought you're having right now is quantum mechanics, thinking about itself. Feynman once said that physics is like sex. Sure, it may give some practical results, but that's not why we do it. We do it because it's thrilling, because it reveals the world to be richer, stranger, and more magnificent than anything we could have invented. Because understanding, real understanding, feels like a kind of love. The universe is not what it appears to be. The table is mostly empty space. The electron is a ghost that becomes real when you look at it. The geometry of rotation has a twist that requires 2 full turns to undo. The properties of particles are not assigned until observed. None of this makes the world less real. It makes it more real. It makes it astonishing. And we are the strange, brief, carbon-based creatures who figured it out. That's not a small thing. That might be the greatest thing. If these ideas left you dizzy with wonder, if you found yourself stopping to think about the probability cloud your own hand is made of, then this channel is exactly where you want to be. We explore physics, not to recite equations, but to feel the shape of reality. Next time, we go deeper. There is always deeper to go. The universe rewards curiosity every single time.